Hello, everybody. This is Myron Pierce, and I am kicking off with my friends, the new Leadership Network Church Next show. I'm a little biased because I got the homies in here with me, and it's going to be a great time. If you are asking about what in the world is Church Next really about, it really is about us serving you, the local church pastors and leaders, with church multiplication and growth. I think we need to constantly talk about it a lot. And on our journey, I've asked some friends to co-host with me that I want to introduce right now. And I want to first start out with my friend, Jade. Jade is awesome. One thing that you need to know about her is she is super anointed because of her accent. So not only because of her accent, let me change that. Not just because of her accent, but definitely in addition. So Jade, talk to us. Who are you? What are you up to? And what are you most excited about when it comes to the Church Next show?
Okay, so my name is Jade Richards, and I'm actually a missionary here from Birmingham, England, UK. And I serve at The Edge. My mission is to help reach the hip hop culture for Christ. And I do that by serving at The Edge Urban Church. Our lead pastor is Pastor Troy Evans, and I also serve as the retail and media director for a brand called Hustle Pray Eat, which is all about working hard, seeking God, and looking after ourselves and other people. I most recently I'm going after the mission with a podcast called Hustle Pray Eat the podcast. I use my experience from the BBC. I used to do radio production for the BBC and hosted local radio back home as well. So I'm using that experience to just use my voice and the voice of other people and giving our church a platform to speak about our mission, because it's a hip hop church. It's very rare. There's not many in the world at all. And I think we have a great story and a great innovative church that really needs a platform to get it out there. So that's what I'm most excited about right now, especially because it's crossing an international border as well, with me having an audience back home too. So that's super exciting, and I'm excited for the future of I'm excited about the future of hip hop and the church because of everything that's going on around us. So that's
I just want to let everybody know. Go ahead and follow Jade. She's super awesome. She's super amazing. And y'all get to kick it with us every week. So super excited about you, Jade. My other friend, she the homie for real. Her name's Jennifer. She really needs no introduction, but she's gonna be co-hosting with us. Amazing leader. Jennifer, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, everybody. My name is Jennifer Benton. I am the founder of Genetic Marketing and also the director of communications for Mount Hermon Baptist Church in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm excited about this show. Of course, Jade and her amazing accent. I love it. And of course, Myron, my bro, awesome time to be with you and to do this journey with you. So really excited to be here.
No, for real. I'm super pumped about this opportunity. Also, shout out to Leadership Network. Go to leadnet.believe for information about what we're going with Leadership Network. So thanks again. I thought, you know what, as we launch this new show on Leadership Network, what friend of mine do I hold dearly and yet captures the whole idea of church leadership, who has been serving the church faithfully and who's been doing a good job at it. And I just thought, you know what, my friend Greg, as we talk about innovation and how that intersects with making a first impression in hospitality, I just thought Greg was the best one in my book, really as an entrepreneur, author, speaker, conference guy. I mean, just all around great leader. So Greg, what it do, baby? Tell us a little bit about just who you are, man. What's cracking? How did we meet? 2 questions in one, man.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Honored to be here. This is an episode of accents because I have a Southern accent. It's not as cool as the English accent, but I'm from the South, the deep South. And I just had somebody yesterday making fun of my accent. They said they loved my Southern accent. So there's going to be all kinds of accents floating around. It's going to see how this is received. But I just celebrated this month, February, my 28th year in ministry. I started in February 1994. Think of where you were in 94. Celebrated 28 years in ministry and served in a variety of roles. And now I oversee the First Impressions Conference. And then I serve as a consultant to churches around the country. The First Impressions Conference is a global conference. So we have last fall, we had 42 countries participate. But as a consultant, I primarily work in North America. I would love to go over to the UK, but primarily so far it's been in North America. But Myron, we met, we got connected online, which is just says a lot right there. So many people, that's how I met Jennifer. So many people get connected online. And now both of you, Myron and Jennifer, and now that I've met Jade, gonna have to have Jade, has spoken at the First Impressions Conference. But we met at Exponential Conference in Orlando, Florida. And then I was coming out to your city to speak somewhere, and I ended up hanging out and getting to visit your church in Omaha, Nebraska. And then we had an in-person conference in Atlanta, Georgia for the First Impressions Conference in 2018, 4 years ago. And we flew you out to speak there because what people didn't realize is we were only going with local Atlanta speakers that lived in the area to save on travel and budget. But I told my team, we have got to bring Myron out. I've been to his church. He's the real deal. I want him to come talk about church planning in the inner city and what First Impressions is like, because they were doing it at a local level in the inner city, doing guest services and First Impressions at a high level. And so had you come out to Atlanta, and then I brought you to my church here in Charlotte, North Carolina. In the Carolinas, you came and stayed a week with me and brought Terrence out, and we had a great week together, and you got to pour into our team here at my church. And so we've hung out all over the country eating chicken together and Mexican food. So we've done it all over the country.
Listen, everybody watching, and those of you who's gonna catch this thing on demand, don't let this brother fool you. This brother is black on the inside. I'm so serious. I'm so serious, man. And Greg, one of the things I've done over the years since I've known you is I have tapped in some of the books that you've written, books that you have authored. I think one was on, can't remember the second part, but it was something about leadership. It's on my desk right now, and I frequent it often. But I was also impressed with the First Impressions Conference. And when people think First Impression, they think program. And so what I would love for you to do is tell us a little bit about the resources that's been helpful, and then the conference, and what's the why behind the conference for you?
Well, the why would start with the genesis of the conference. I was consulting. I could mention I consult with churches. Pre-COVID, it was twice a month. I would go out every other weekend and work with the church around the country. Haven't traveled as much since COVID, but pre-COVID was every other week. I was gone somewhere, and I was working with the church in Raleigh, North Carolina. And I always go over the report just like this via Zoom with the team after I get back to my home. I work up a report, and I was going over it with the executive pastor. And she said, we just hired somebody to be over First Impressions. What conference should we send her to? And I was like, there isn't anything. I've spoke on First Impressions at tons of conferences all over, but I was a breakout, a track, a keynote, but there's nothing dedicated to that. And I spoke with one of my entrepreneur buddies and friends, and he said, Greg, you need to do this, man. He said, that's your world. You need to run with it. And we just started it, and 6 months later held our first conference, and just took off running from there. So we've been going since 2018, started it in 2017, but started it in the year 2018 was the first time we had held a conference, and we held two, one online and one in person in Atlanta. And so we offer all kinds of resources. We have an email newsletter that we send out twice a week. It's just a free email, but it's always pointing to free conferences, free resources, free downloads, free PDFs. We're always sending out free resources to bless people. I've been blogging for I want to say 18 years at gregatkinson.com. And so I'm always trying to put out free resources out there. And then I have some ebooks on my Facebook page and other places that people can get. But the first book I ever wrote before I wrote physical books was an ebook called Church Leadership 101, and it was downloaded tons of times all over the world, but it was just a free ebook, and I just uploaded it. People could download it. But so I'm all about the free resources, and we do that with the conference. And then we try to hold some webinars and other events, and we've done some local stuff. And then I still speak at conferences. I still go out and speak and train and go into churches. Just got finished. I was speaking a couple months ago to Baptists in Houston, Texas, and 2 weeks ago to Methodists in Pigeon Forge. And then I'm going to Indiana pretty soon to do my own guest services conference for a collection of churches. There'll be like 10 to 12 local churches that come together at one host church, and I'll be speaking and teaching on these concepts. But it's my passion. I love it. As you have experienced, I live and breathe hospitality. It's my world. It's something I'm serious about. And we have somebody staying with us right now. I am big, and it's not the first time that somebody has lived with us that we're hosting and treating and blessing. And so it's just part of my DNA and the way I raise my kids. But love doing it.
So Greg, that's amazing, and thank you for all the work and the resources that you put out into the world. If you was to ask any church leader or any church member, hospitality and first impressions is something that they would say is important to them. But can you go a little bit deeper and speak to us about the theology behind first impressions, and also why should we be viewing it through an innovative lens? Yeah,
great question, Jade. So what I love about first impressions, and I kind of put it all, a very popular coin term right now is guest services, and that comes from Chick-fil-A and Disney and the hospitality industry. But I always put it under the umbrella of hospitality, and I think of biblical hospitality. And when I teach on this and when I write on this, my book, Secrets of a Secret Shopper, I start out talking about the biblical mandate. When I read scripture, starting in Leviticus, welcome the stranger, in the Old Testament to the New Testament, there are tons of verses about hospitality. Jesus said, "For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you welcomed me in." So there's that word stranger again. Hebrews says, "Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers." And so from old to new, sometimes it's translated, welcome the newcomer, welcome the stranger, welcome the newcomer. But it's a biblical mandate. And Myron, you know this, in Timothy and Titus, when it lists the qualifications of an elder, bishop, or pastor, you have to be hospitable. It's one of the qualifications to even be a pastor. God takes hospitality very seriously. And so
hey, Greg, hold on real quick. I want you to finish Jade's question. Don't forget your thought. But you just said it's a qualification.
Right.
It's a biblical, as a leader, it's a biblical qualification. So once you finish with this question with Jade, follow up and expound on that a little bit more for us.
Sure. So teaching theology to church leaders and congregants, we are to welcome the stranger. The Bible is big on loving our neighbor. Never in my life have I seen this so tested as in the last several years of the last administration and what's going on with COVID and masks and vaccines and all this going on. Just speaking real to you, what's happening in the real world. I don't know where y'all live, but in the real world where I am here in the South, never has this been tested so much of what does it tangibly look like to love your neighbor and wear a mask and go out and love others. It's not just memory verses that we memorized when we were kids and we forget about and we don't live our life, but to show tangible love to others and to welcome the stranger, to love our neighbor, and to be the body of Christ to people, to be the hands and feet of Christ to people. And it's that old bracelet saying, what would Jesus do? And so just looking at how we treat others. I've always said that hospitality and generosity are two sides of the same coin. So we should be hospitable, we should be great hosts, and we should be generous with our time, treasure, finances, talent to give back to others and to bless others. And so, Jade, am I answering all of your question? I want to make sure I get to it.
Yeah, so the last part of the question was also, why should we be seeing it through the lens of innovation?
Yeah, so my first book I wrote was called Strange Leadership, and it's an orange book here behind me. It's the second edition, and it's 40 ways to lead an innovative organization. And I talk about the birth of innovation. How does innovation come about? And innovation to me is following the leading of the Holy Spirit. And I think as we go throughout our daily lives, that as we follow the leading of the Holy Spirit, God's going to lead us to love our neighbor. God's going to lead us to be hospitable, to welcome the stranger, welcome the newcomer. And that affects how we lead innovative organizations, which is what my book was about, leading an innovative organization. I hope every church is innovative. I'm passionate about innovation. I hope every church is innovative and using technologies like Zoom and Zoom small groups and Zoom hosting and online church and Facebook Live, and that making the most of every technology and doing the best they can with all they can. Talking about 2020 and COVID and what's happened in the real world in the last 2 years is churches had to fly years forward in innovation. Now, I have been speaking and writing about church online since 2008. You can go back on my blog, gregatkinson.com, and see me critiquing church online in 2008. And there's screenshots of churches. And I was telling people, go online, have a campus pastor, an online campus pastor, and host and welcome. And then 12 years later in 2020, COVID happens and churches are scrambling and running around. And, oh my gosh, we got to get online. And I was like, I've been saying this since 2008, but hopefully the church knows that there's no going back. We have to keep using media and video and proclaiming the good news of the gospel in all forms of media, podcasts, other webs, things like this, webinars, using tools for God's glory. And that's innovation in one way as far as technology.
Can I just speak to that just a little bit? Because I think it's so important, because I know 10 years ago for me as well, somebody would ask me if I saw a church, what would my kind of church be? And I said a church where we go and hear the word and then get it back out into the world through media. And I think it's just important for people to understand that God knows that media advances is going to come, and he's been speaking to us about it for many years. So it's not new, it's not shocking to God, and it's not ungodly either, because there's probably people out there that think that too.
Yes.
Yeah. I think
it's Greg, I absolutely love what you do. And having been part of the First Impressions Conference, I know how much of a blessing it is. There were even some other opportunities that opened up for me through that. And when I went to these other churches, they're like, oh my God, First Impressions is so innovative. Like, we need this. And just everything that was shared during that conference was such a blessing to these churches. So kudos to you for doing that, for occupying that space that so many people need. You're welcome. I have a question. So I'm gonna stay in the lane of innovation. It's a two-part question here. So what can churches do to make their virtual experience more inviting? And now that we are embarking on the metaverse, what does hospitality look like to you in that realm?
Okay, two-parter. So one, I've already forgot the first part. forgive me, I woke up early. What was the,
That's
what was the
okay.
first part of the question?
So,
Innovation
so
something.
yeah. So what can churches do to make their virtual experience more inviting?
Yeah. So when COVID first happened, I was doing podcasts and webinars and trainings online. I was partnering up with old friends like Jeff Reed and Danny Franks and Jason Young and Neil Smith, and partnering with guys doing all kinds of things to be a resource to the church and to help them navigate this new season. And that was actually the theme of the 2020 First Impressions Conference, navigating a new season. But I tried to dive right in and say, okay, here's what you need. And one of the things that I was passionate about when talking about innovation and being welcoming is, don't just set a video camera in the back of the room, and when the service starts, hit record, and when the service ends, hit stop. It's got to be more engaging in that. So I like to have a pre-show and an after party, and to have hosts and MCs and people that talk to the camera and that are off on the side stage or out in the lobby in the foyer or something, speaking to people and saying, okay, today we're excited. We're starting this new series and it's on Genesis, and we're excited that we're going to be talking about Noah today. And if you didn't know, there's ways to get involved in small groups, both online and in person, and having a pre-show presence. And then now let's kick off the service and sending it to the service. And then to try to implement things like when your host comes up to do announcements, to implement. I'm a big fan of like text in church and products that use innovation like that. And so to say, text new to whatever your number is if you're watching online. And then a lot of churches nowadays, because I watch online church every week, a lot are putting up a QR code, so you can just point your camera up at the screen and instantly open up a digital connection card. And so being able to connect with people and engage with people, whether it's texting a word like welcome or new or guest or something like that, or family or fam, whatever it may be, to text a word and get a digital connection card sent back, or scan a QR code. And then at the end of the service, I like to have a wrap up, like a post service or after party, where we talk about, wow, Pastor really got into some stuff today. Let's debrief, let's unpack it, let's talk about it. And to be able to also have some type of response and have people to be able to participate with prayer and giving. But if they make a decision or raise a hand or, have some kind of response. But I've been saying this for years, and it goes back to Leonard Sweet, who spoke at our conference in 2019. Years ago, he wrote about EPIC, experiential, participatory, interactive, communicative. And so to be as experiential and participatory as possible. So that to me speaks to engagement. And then in the metaverse, what was your question about the metaverse, Jen?
Real quick, I actually wanted to piggyback on what you just said. So for churches that may be a little bit space challenged or tech challenged, I wanted to offer something in regards to that after party. So with my church, of course, we don't have a lot of space, and we wanted to do the after party, and we're like, oh my God, how do we switch from the sanctuary to somewhere that's quiet enough where the sanctuary sound is not bleeding into? So what we did, we came out with a secondary show called Talk It Out Tuesday. And then we got together on Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. We recorded it after church. So it was Sunday that we recorded it, and then we aired it on Facebook Live on Tuesday nights. And our congregation, our bishop, was able to get into the chat and kind of just go back and forth about the sermon. We did a clip from the sermon. So we made it its own production, its own show. So you guys, if you don't have the space to do the after party, it's all right. Make it your own. Do a show afterwards sometime during the week so that you can engage everybody. And I totally agree with you about not putting the camera in the back and pressing start and ending. In fact, at your conference, one of my points was it's okay to talk in church.
Right.
Growing up in church, anybody that grew up in church, you were kind of scared. You were told, don't talk, don't walk, don't do anything but sit still and listen to the pastor. But during these days, you have to talk. People want to know that they are seen, that they're heard, that they're cared about. So if you see someone in your chat, what I've been implemented in my church for our virtual, we call it cyber sanctuary, is virtual greeters. Yep. So this is a great way for those of you guys that have an e-membership. If you have members that live outside of your city and state and they want to serve, put them on the e-team, have them be e-greeters. And then that way they can get to know people. They can feel like they're a part of your church community, even though they're not able to be present there. So those are awesome points, Greg, that you just shared.
You can also have a after party right here in like a Zoom room. You can gather together in Zoom. And then, by the way, one of the books I read during COVID was Myron's book on digital church, digital ministry. And Myron has digital campuses all over the world, like globe. And so follow Myron if you're not already, and looking at ways to pivot and to change and to expand your reach into the kingdom of church through innovative ways.
You know, Greg and Jennifer, it's so interesting because I want people who are watching now and maybe later. I think a lot of times it's easy for us to, we hear something or we see something and then we copy and paste it. And the principles, you're talking about different practices, but the principle behind what you're saying is so huge. It's a biblical understanding of hospitality. And I think as we solidify that foundation in our, it's almost like, you know, the whole idea of if you just plant a church, or, you know, maybe we talk about at Exponential about like the levels of churches, where church is at in level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. But as we talk about hospitality, I think hospitality has to be a foundation if we're going to become like level 4, level 5 churches. Yeah. And so my question, Greg, is like, where does a pastor or leader start? And they say, you know what, we have greeters, we have this, we have that. We're doing this, but not like we're still declining and we're still doing the same things and all these things. And so if a leader is watching, Greg, like, and they say, where do I start? Where can I begin changing the culture of my church so that we are on the cutting edge of reaching people? What would you say?
Couple things, and you and I have talked about this, Myron. One, couple very affordable resources. My book you can get on Kindle for $5, Secrets of a Secret Shopper. But I talk about the history of hospitality, the biblical mandate, the theology, all of that. So starting with a biblical view of hospitality. So we have our foundation as a pastor and as church leader. Also, we felt this in our heart at the First Impressions Conference. And so our 2019 theme, every conference has a different theme. Our 2019 theme was the hospitality culture. And if you missed it, on the firstimpressions.com, firstimpressionsconference.com website, you can just click on archives and you can go in and look, and you'll see a branding that says hospitality culture. But we address this culture of hospitality because I've said this for a long time. And Myron, I know you and I have talked about it, but hospitality is a lifestyle, it's a mindset, and the way you lead your church, it's all about culture. You know, you hear these stories of these parking lot teams where the single mom comes there in a car with a nearly flat tire, and she comes out of the service and they've changed the tire for her and given her a brand new tire, and they went and bought a tire with their own money and they replaced it and put it on while she was in the service. When she drove up, they asked her for the keys and said, do you mind if we bless your car? And they get excited about what they're doing, just loving people where they are. And so it starts with the heart, as all things. Ministry is about people. It always has been, always will be. Ministry is about people, and people first. I talk about that in my book, Church Leadership Essentials. And so ministry is always about people. The interruptions aren't interruptions. When somebody knocks on your door and says, Pastor, can I have a word? That's not an interruption in your day. that is what God wanted you to do on that day, and that is an important meeting. And so ministry is about people. And so starting with a mindset of how can we be as hospitable as possible, as welcoming as possible. We want to welcome all people despite any kind of background. We want to welcome them with open arms to our church. I grew up here in the deep South with 99.9% white churches where I grew up. And every head would turn if somebody Black walked in the South. And I remember fighting battles. I was telling Myron before when we were hanging out previously, I've been fighting diversity and race in the church since the early 90s, when I brought a friend to my church and they barred the doors the next week and said, nobody's getting back in here. And been fighting this for years. And so it starts with the heart and a heart for people. If we don't love people, we need to leave ministry right now.
Absolutely.
If we don't love people, we need to leave ministry right now. And so starting with a heart for people, a love for all people. I don't care if they're Republican or Democrat or independent. I don't care if they're Black, white, Asian, Latino, a love for all people. And then we welcome them with open arms. So it's a culture. It's how you lead your staff. Pastors, if you're demeaning to your church staff, if you're talking down to your church staff, if you're bullying your church staff, that is a ripple effect. That affects all down. And volunteers can pick up on that. Earl McClellan spoke at our conference from Shoreline City in Dallas, and he said people can smell fake. People can smell fake. They know if you're not genuine. And so how you treat your people matters. And so start with the heart.
Amen. I 100% agree. And it's so great to hear that. And you've given some really great examples of practical things that churches have done or people have done. And one thing that I've learned being under the leadership of Pastor Troy Evans is something that makes a great leader is somebody that is willing and humble enough to learn from other leaders, and churches that are willing to learn from other churches. So having said that, are there any examples of some churches that you could let us know of that are doing an excellent job of great first impressions through an innovative lens?
Yeah, there are several churches I keep an eye on. I want to tell you those that I zoomed in on in 2020 when COVID hit and everybody was freaking out and what do we do and how do we move? I went to these churches and I watched them almost every week, and what they were doing was so innovative and so amazing and so just breath of fresh air. So I'm here in Charlotte. That's obviously the home of Elevation Church and Stephen Furtick, and they were crushing church online in the EFAM around the world. I kept an eye on Brian Tome in Crossroads Church in Cincinnati. Brian Tome spoke at our 2020 First Impressions Conference. They were crushing church anywhere. It's just amazing what Crossroads was doing. I was watching Judah Smith in Church Home. Judah Smith is speaking at our spring conference coming up in a couple of months. Judah Smith is speaking at our First Impressions Conference for spring 2022. And I was watching Church Home, and they had pivoted to a totally digital church with no meeting in person, just Church Home online, and was watching them. And then when you look at, like, so people say, well, I'm not as big as Crossroads and I'm not as innovative as Judah Smith and we're not as large as Elevation. When I went to Myron's church in Omaha, Nebraska, inner city, they had read my book, Secrets of a Secret Shopper, and they implemented it. And I was humbled and honored and blown away. Myron said, we read your book, our staff read your book, and I want you to come check us out. Tell us what you think. I come driving up to this church in the inner city, and they have a parking team greeting me outside at my car. They have greeters, they have ushers. Now, they don't look like the ushers at your church. There's some hardcore dudes that you do not want to mess with that have arms like me. They are some big dudes. But they had big hearts, and they were awesome ushers, and they made me feel welcome. And I was blown away by the first impressions at this inner city church in Omaha, Nebraska, Mission Church. Shout out to Myron Pierce. So they are living it. They just read a $5 book and said, how can we implement this? And then he took it to a new level and did stuff that I didn't even talk about or write about. They just took it to a new level. They got ideas generated. They discussed it as a staff, and then they executed. But you can do it at any size church. And then there's Jeff Reed and his movement and what's happening with digital churches and hybrid and physical churches that are springing up, and people that are people like Tyler Sampson and Church Anywhere, and people that are doing some crazy things. And I mean crazy in a good way. That just gets me excited when I read about it or I see it online. And I'll tell you my secret for years. I learn a lot by watching small church plants innovate, because they have to be lean and mean. They don't have much budget. They can't splurge on things. They can't waste money. They have to be lean, mean, strategic, and they get it done. They're very innovative. I talk about that in at least 2 of my books, that my eyes are always on church plants. But I sit at home every Sunday afternoon and I just scroll through my Instagram feed and I see what's happening in the world of the Big C Church and what was happening today. And I'll see pictures from Earl McClellan and Shoreline City and others, and I'll think, man, I wish I was there today. That looks awesome. You know, Jennifer's talked about this in summer conferences. She spoke that how to use Instagram and social media. Are people in your community looking at your social media and saying, feeling FOMO, you know, wow, I missed out. I really wish I was there today. This looks incredible. Do you see these people? Do you see these volunteers in a t-shirt smiling and waving and having fun? This looks awesome. Hey, honey, we need to go visit there next week. It's just the way you use social media matters so much now.
You know what, Greg? I'm
and
so
as
glad.
you know, that's your first impression. Your true first impression is online, website,
Right.
and social media.
Yeah. So, okay, man, I need 3 more hours with you, Greg. So I want our audience to capture this on Church Next Show. We're not just a show for big churches. We're not just a show for small churches. We're a show for the church.
Right.
And what I hear Greg saying is, don't miss this, big churches. I'm putting you in the hot seat right now. Your next innovative move after listening to the Holy Spirit is following churches smaller than you. I went to Greg's church. Before I even went to his church, I went to his house. And when I walk, I'm not even playing. When I walk in a house, there's a candy bar.
Take all the candy you want.
For my taking. I opened up his refrigerator. And like when I open up his refrigerator, Jay, he's like, yeah, get anything you want. In the refrigerator is all kinds of cold espresso coffee. It blew my mind. And so when we're talking about hospitality or making a first impression, overwhelmingly, what am I doing personally? And then who am I learning from that I don't have to learn from because I'm already in a seat of pioneering?
And then when you came to my church, how small was it? We had what, 50 people there? 50 people at an inner city church plant. And we were getting it done.
Indeed.
We had greeters that have black hello shirts on to say hello, and they have a Dream Center on the back neck, and they're out there waving, and they do not look like somebody you would see on iStock photo that would be greeting at the typical church. But we started somewhere. Somebody asked me when I spoke at that Methodist conference a couple of weeks ago, they were saying, well, what about small churches? How do we get started in small churches? I said, I've done it. I said, my church is 40 people right now on a good day, post-COVID. And we started with 2 greeters, Ori and Miss Janice. And they were faithful, and they wore their shirt, and they came out there and greeted, and they were so happy to get a black hello shirt. That's how we started. And then I quickly handed it to Ori. As you know, Myron, when you came, Ori was over First Impressions. And I said, I'll coach you, I'll train you, I'll invest in you. And I brought him to my Charlotte Getaway weekend, and we poured into him a week with our facilitators, pouring into him as a leader. But I didn't run it myself. I said, I will invest in you, and I handed it off to him. Yeah.
Wow. Jennifer, what's brewing in your heart? What do you want to ask Greg?
Yeah, you know, I'm sitting here and my wheels are turning as I'm thinking about, wow, we are embarking on, as of next Wednesday, is going to be Lent season. For those of you that celebrate Lent, Easter, all of that is coming around. And I just started thinking like, oh my God, we could get shirts that have different sayings like, hey, I give hugs. Because with this COVID climate, you really don't know if you can hug somebody or anything like that when you come into a church. So how awesome would it be to say, hey, I give hugs, and people know I can go to her or him and get a hug? Because in this time, we still need love. People still need to feel that care when they come into your sanctuary. So yeah, my wheels are turning already. But Greg, okay, so I want to know, as a secret shopper, what are some of the cringe-worthy things that you've seen on your journeys?
Jennifer, I don't think you were supposed to tell all thousands of people that he's a secret shopper, so now he don't have a job.
No, that's why I wrote. That's why I wrote.
That's why he wrote the book. That's why he wrote the book.
No, seriously, I wanted to work myself out of a job. I said, there are so many churches that, as much as they want to, they can't afford to bring in an outside consultant. So buy the book for $5-10 and don't fly me out for thousands. Just buy the book and read it and do it yourself, like Myron did at his church. So many churches can't afford it. That's exactly why I wrote the book, to work myself out of a job. I don't want to travel 52 weeks a year. But cringeworthy moments, believe it or not, a lot of times they happen at some of the largest churches in the country. You would not believe some of the photos on my camera roll that I have seen of things that just look like a disaster, a train wreck, signage that just was handwritten. Somebody grabbed a sheet of paper and wrote cafe on it and stuck it on a thing. And this is a church of 12,000. And I'm thinking, you can't get a framed sign, like a nice printed sign that says cafe. You got to handwrite with a Sharpie. I've seen some things that just terrible. And so I said this for years, excellence transcends. It does not matter what style church you are, what denomination you are, what size you are, whether you're rural, country, urban, suburban, city church, excellence transcends. And so do things well, no matter what your size is, no matter what your denomination is. If you need to go to a print shop and get something printed up where it looks nice, but there's so many times where I'll walk through the halls of a church and it's the wayfinding signage, it's the classroom signage, it's the things that just look like somebody didn't care and they just wrote it with their hand and stuck it on a wall and taped it to a wall. It's just an eyesore, and it makes people think you don't care. And I talk about that in the book. I dive into that in Secrets of a Secret Shopper.
Can I interject something that I just want to keep bringing it back to innovation and hospitality? Yeah. You said people need, like, the whole idea of care, and I don't think I've thought about hospitality in that way.
Absolutely.
Like, if we see level 3 church, if we're a level 3 church and we see hospitality as creating signage and putting people at, like you're not saying that at all. Like, what you're saying is, do you care? And if you care, it should be done with enough excellence so that people feel like I'm at home.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what I hear you saying, Greg?
Absolutely. And I'll put another plug in because it's free and I'm shameless. Our First Impressions Conference is free. The theme this year is We Are Family, and we're talking about, come on in. It's about community, a focus on community, and welcome home. We are family. Come on in. We want you here. We care, and we cared enough to prepare. I have said for years, company is coming. Are you ready? Are you prepared? Company is coming. If I was coming to your house or Myron, you've been to my house. If you were coming to my house, I would put away the laundry. We would vacuum the floors. We would light a candle. We would clean up. We would prepare for you as we have when you came. Company is coming every week. Every Sunday is somebody's first Sunday. Company is coming every week. Are you prepared? And what that shows is you do care. Yeah.
Can I ask a missional question, and then Jade has a question because she's smiling. Okay, so when it like Exponential and Leadership Network alike, we're really big on the mission of God. We're really big on church planting, missionaries, next generation, metaverse. Like we're in the thick of it. Greg, what does hospitality look like on mission? And are there churches who have asked you to come to say, would you come and critique and evaluate how we're doing with hospitality as it pertains to the missional endeavors that we're involved in the community? Have you taken that approach? Talk to us about that. What would you advise?
Yeah, I talked with the Eagle Brook in Minneapolis, a massive church. There's a lot of churches that will have me come spend the week with them during the week and talk about how they treat their staff, how they treat their teams, how they treat their volunteers. And is it a culture of hospitality? Does it pervade the whole organization? And then when you talk about on mission, being the mission, just read the Gospels, look at the life of Jesus, look at the time he spent with people, look at the woman at the well, look at the Matthew party, look at the calling of Matthew, look at the come down from the tree, Zacchaeus. Jesus spent time with people. Ministry is people. If you take nothing else away, ministry is people, and we've got to love people or get out of ministry. We've got to love people. We got to care for people with a heart for people. And if you read the Gospels, Jesus took time. Now, yes, he got away. He had rest. He had Sabbath. He had times away on the mountain, but he also took time to look people in the eye, and to all the stories we know of the woman caught in adultery and the woman at the well and the woman who poured perfume on his feet. He was all about, you know what's amazing about that? Jesus impacted thousands of people, because we know the feeding of 5,000, but those were individual moments and they got captured in scripture. Those are one-on-one moments. One woman washing Jesus's feet, one woman caught in adultery, one woman at the well. And what did that woman do after she spent some time with Jesus? She went and told everybody. Now we're talking evangelism. If that's not the mission, I don't know what it is. So Jesus spent time and took time to care for one woman at the well. And she went and said, you've got to know this man, and told the whole community. Now we have evangelism happening because he spent time. And we know Jesus invested in the 12, and he invested in the 3, Peter, James, and John, and they went and changed the world. And here we are in 2022, still talking about the good news because Jesus took time with the one.
Wow.
Absolutely. And so there was just 2 things going off on what you said. The first one was about like you just said, the one-on-one interactions. And I've always told people, you never know who you're talking to. You never know who's in front of you. You never know what impact that one conversation can have. So always put your best foot forward, not just for yourself, but the fact that we are advocates for Christ. But I want to go back to what you were saying as well about when it came to hospitality in churches, and it shows that you care about the people that are coming in. But how would you also speak about it from the standpoint of it shows you also care for God's house, and that we are good stewards of God's house? And what's your approach, or what do you think about that statement as well?
I think being a good steward of the mission is very important, because it affects how we use our time and how we use our treasure, how we use our finances. And so talking about how we use our time and treasure and our talents, what do we do with what God has given to us as stewards, and how do we use that for ministry? And so how you allocate funds in the house, how you allocate funds as a church, whether you're going to invest in technology, whether you're going to put a new coat of paint on the wall in the children's ministry, and whether you're going to invest in new cameras for online church, and how you steward the finances to further the kingdom and to further the message and the reach. But I think that's very worthy to think through. And a lot of what I do when I speak somewhere or when I consult with the church even is say, now here are some things for you to think about. I'm not going to give you the answer. Go talk about it on your team. Go have a staff meeting or a staff retreat, get away and say, Greg said something that's kind of been under my skin. You know, he was talking about loving your neighbor and he brought up stuff that I'm not comfortable with. Let's just talk this out and let you guys get away off site and talk this out as a team. Because what I have found, and I've coached a lot of pastors with my dry erase board back here that's covered up by that Jesus painting, is if everybody's not rowing in the same direction, you're not going to get to your destination. And so everybody's got to be on the same page. And so are we missionally aligned? Are we missionally aligned where everybody is rowing in the same direction? You think of those long boats, the crew, that when people are doing the rowing, if one guy is going opposite against them, you're never going to win the race. And so we need everybody rowing in the same direction, on the same page, on the same mission. And so that affects your team culture, because again, people smell fake. And if you have bad attitudes on the team, you're never going to get where you're supposed to get. And it'll just keep pulling you down and pulling you down.
Amen. Thank you.
And that's so good. So I am an outreach minded person. My thing, you just spoke about evangelism, and that really is the Great Commission. So speaking from a hospitality standpoint, how do we kind of embed hospitality in the members to where it spreads outside of the four walls?
I think we model it. If they come to our church and it's cold, and there's too many cold churches in North America, and that upsets me. But if and I mean a Jesus kind of holy hanger, if your church is cold, then the members are going to be cold, and the people they interact with at their job as an employer or employee, the people they interact with in their community and their transactions, the person behind you in traffic, the person behind you in the line in Starbucks, how you interact and rub against people in life. If it's never been modeled to you, this is a house of hospitality. Imagine that as a mission of a church. This is a house of prayer, but it's also a house of hospitality. And we're going to welcome people, and we're going to be warm and welcoming. And we're going to model this to you, that the pastor, and I know Myron's heart is like this, just like my pastor's heart is like this. He's not above cleaning the toilets if he needs to. The pastor is not above getting on his hands and knees and washing feet, whatever it takes, and having servant leadership, which it should be the epitome for all of us. All of us should be servant leaders in ministry. And so modeling servant leadership so that there's a ripple effect, and it goes down when Myron's talking about the levels of churches, so that our church, there's a culture of hospitality and a culture of servant leadership, so that our people feel so loved. Do you know that a smile is contagious? I got upset with somebody in traffic the other day, and I gave this woman a crazy look, and she looked at me with the biggest smile. And a smile is disarming. It was like, oh, I don't want to be mad at you. She just smiled at me real big, like, I'm sorry for cutting you off. And I'm like, oh man, a smile is disarming. And so if we can be warm and welcoming, and then that will impact our people. And you know what this is also part of, which is also a big part of the church, just like evangelism, is discipleship. I actually wrote an article years ago for Exponential called What's More Important, Evangelism or Discipleship? And the answer was both. And how we disciple our people comes back to hospitality as well. How we model servant leadership, how we model hospitality, how we serve others, how we wait on others, how we bless others and host others. You know, people are coming to our churches every weekend. Do we see ourselves as hosting them? Do we see ourselves as serving them? And so this ripples out in discipleship, and it flows out of evangelism. It's both and.
I love that, Greg. And We've reached our 5-minute mark. I wanna give some recaps, and I'm pretty sure our audience has have their recaps as well. Just to give us some tracks to run on. If you are a church or a pastor, leader, you're saying, I want a culture that resembles, promotes hospitality at a biblical level. Number one, go back and watch this broadcast. Take your team through it. But here are some takeaways. Number one, innovation and for making a first impression at the end of the day is about listening to the Spirit of God. Before we can copy and paste, we have to spend some time in prayer and listening to the Spirit. Following after the narrative of the Gospels, where we see hospitality as a beacon of light before sinners and church people alike. But then you said, Greg, that implementing fast is important. And so don't wait to implement what you've learned. Take one thing, implement it, evaluate it, tweak it, measure it, celebrate it. But then the other thing I heard you say, Greg, was ideation. Who are you learning from? And how are you brainstorming, caring for people in a practical way? And then continuing to educate yourself around hospitality, and then to develop your volunteer base, those who have influence, and ultimately the community. Greg, with 4 minutes left, we have a lightning round for you.
Let's do it.
We want to know what's your food in your favorite restaurant, and then a book we should be reading in this next season.
Okay.
2 minutes.
My favorite food is Mexican. We all know that. If you've spent any time with me anywhere in the country, it's Mexican. My favorite local restaurant it sounds like a holy place. It's called Casa Tequila, and they make good tequila, but it's just a great Mexican restaurant with great chips and salsa, and that's how I judge a restaurant, is the chips and salsa. But a book we should be reading. Let me see what I've got near me. I keep going back to this in my personal life. Draw the Circle by Mark Batterson. It's a 40-day devotional, and God used it to change my life. And it actually is the reason I ended up where I am now in Charlotte. The first time I went through it, on day one, I never had any idea I'd be moving here. And on day 40, I was offered a job, and next thing I know, I'm moving here. And so it's a great. Mark Batterson spoke at our conference. He's a longtime friend. I used to pastor in Washington, D.C., and I love his stuff. He's also got a new book on Win the Day, which I encourage you to check out.
Love it. Before we land, Jennifer or Jade, any final words or anything that Greg said that really hit home for you?
I think just all of it, honestly. I was like just nodding my head the whole time, like yes. I think a lot of it was confirmation for things that I've heard God speak to me about personally, about even my calling and me being in front of cameras and media and stuff like that. And just it reiterated the message that he spoke to me 10 years ago. My last pastor always told me that I was called to media. And at the time I was new to Christianity, so I didn't fully understand what he meant, but now, especially at such a time as this, it makes total sense, and you just really confirmed a lot of things for me. So thank you. It was great to meet you and speak to you.
Awesome. Great to meet you.
Thank you.
Yes. This has been so awesome, Greg. Like, I think every time I get a chance to sit around you, I'm learning something new. Definitely get my wheels turning, and it's just like, oh my God. You are not to be cheesy, but you're like the apostle of hospitality. Like, you are just so knowledgeable and such a rich source of information that I really pray that anybody that listens to this is inspired and feels that they can actually do it, no matter how big or how small their congregation is. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. I can tell this is going to be a great show. You three are going to be great. And so Church Next is the show to tune into every week. I'll be watching. This is going to be a great show, and I can't wait to see future episodes.
Yeah, you heard it from Greg. This is the show to be watching, baby. It's the show. Hey, listen, before we land, make sure you go to leadnet.org, all things leadership network. Be sure to follow Jen at Jen Janelle on IG, Jade Rich 18 on IG. You can't hang up without also following my man Greg Atkinson. You can go to gregatkinson.com. Also, go to the First Impression Conference website, firstimpressionsconference.com, and sign up. It's completely free, y'all. Get plugged in, tons of resources. We'll see you here next week as we continue really with this idea of innovation. You do not want to miss it. Again, thank you, Greg, my co-host. Appreciate y'all. We see y'all next week.